I don't know if it's just me, but so far 2024 has felt like the year of the survival game, honestly. With titles like Pow World
For
and
real.
Shrouded releasing to great
There are
success.
like 10
Pow
plus
World peaked at like over 2 million
survivals.
concurrent players, which put it in second place of all time, just behind PUBG. And in Shrouded, while a much smaller game in comparison, capping out at 160,000 concurrent, I'll just say I personally enjoyed that game a whole lot more, thanks to it feeling like a good old-fashioned RPG adventure on top of the survival elements. And then, of course, there was Sons of the Forest, which after a year of updates and improvements left early access into full release and seems to be
Oh, we
trucking along
did.
nicely. And we also saw
I should
Nightingale
play it.
release into early access, although
Hey yo, does that mean I can play the forest now? Because I didn't play it, I was waiting for it. That's cool. And I really enjoy Nightingale as well. Like, it's very enjoyable to just go through it and grind for me.
unfortunately, that one didn't quite land as well as I had hoped. Let's see if they can turn that ship around in the coming years. So yeah, we're only a couple months into the year, and already fans of the survival genre have a lot on their plate. Well, strap in, because there's another contestant stepping into the arena with the hopes of being crowned the best new survival game of 2024, and that is quite a tall order given, as I just went over, all of the great games that we've seen thus far. I'm talking about Dune Awakening, the open-world survival sandbox MMO being developed by Funcom. This is a studio that is quite established in both genres this game is dipping its toes into. Their MMO lineage goes all the way back to 2001 when they released Anarchy Online, followed by Age of Conan and The Secret World in subsequent years. And then of course they've got their survival game, Conan Exiles, which launched in 2018 and is probably the studio what they're best known for, as well as being their most successful release. Funcom has stated on numerous occasions that with
They're definitely known for Conan in general, like just the genre, just the franchise.
Dune Awakening, their hope, their goal is to take the past 20 years of experience in both of these genres and bring them together in what they are hoping is their best game yet. And yeah, I am hoping for that too. I've been keeping a close eye on this one since it was announced about 2 years ago, and news really has been ramping up recently. Beta testing, we know, is currently underway. Things are going well.
Can I just say I'm skeptical because of stuff like Ashes of Creation that never come out, or simply the fact that I don't particularly see how you can make a survival be good as an MMO. Like, take a look at New World. It's kind of like,
At least according to the developer, and it looks like they are still on track to release the game later this year. On the surface, when you take a look at its features and planned content, Dune Awakening does sound like a pretty promising premise. Beyond the basics of what we have known and covered in prior videos, they recently held a 30-minute showcase providing a whole lot more detail and some gameplay footage. They're describing this game as their take on survival in an open-world sandbox while harkening back to the days of traditional MMORPGs. For the survival elements, these will include the traditional beginnings of starting out with nothing and then venturing out to gather the things needed to survive. You'll be collecting water from plants and bodies to stave off thirst, keeping in the shade to reduce water consumption, avoiding or engaging with enemy NPCs as well as other players, collecting loot, and even taking shelter from its deadly sandstorms. Then of course there is going to be crafting. You'll be gathering resources, various forms of stone, plants, and metals, which you will then use to build up an arsenal of weapons, gear, clothing. There's base building and even vehicle construction. You'll go through the typical survival loop, starting out with nothing, gathering the basic resources to craft basic tools, then build basic crafting stations, which lets you progress into the next tier to gather better resources, to craft better tools, so on and so on.
so where do you have
As
the
for
MMO
game's
aspect
MMO
for
elements, well, for one, they've said that servers will be supporting up to thousands of players simultaneously and will feature endgame that's centered around this large-scale combat with groups of players split into various factions, all fighting for resources in what they are calling all-out ground and air warfare, combined arms, similar to what you see in games like Battlefield or PlanetSide. You'll have people running around on foot doing shooting, melee, casting abilities and stuff, and then people in various ground and air vehicles.
Sounds
coming
interesting.
into the fray as well at a massive scale. For the game's combat, it is a third-person.
It sounds interesting, but at the same time, it sounds bullshit. Like, servers that hold thousands of players, like, how exactly do you plan to have the map system, and how exactly do you plan to have our housing and our base building and the interaction of bases and everything, right? Like, it's a tall order, but like split the bases on your own little part of the shard of a realm, right? Where people can't join unless they're invited or they're your friends and you let them join at any time. It's kind of lame. Like a lot of systems use that and like Wildstar. And while it's cute, it's also kind of lame. And then you have problems like Arc and the C variant of Arc, which my brain can't conjure up the name of, where you have a lot of grieving and base building is a pain in the butt. Planet has that player base building in hundreds. You don't really have player base building. That's the thing with Planetside. You don't really have player base building.
Action shooter type of a game. You'll pick from a wide array of crafted weapons, gadgets,
Like,
vehicles,
not
gear,
survival
and
style.
from different great schools of the Imperium, which is basically the Dune's universe's take on magic systems. This will also be tied into various progression and leveling systems where you unlock new abilities with time. So what they've said is that when you make a character, you will select who your mentor is, and this is sort of like picking a starting class. It's going to determine the abilities you begin with, and then as you play, you level up, unlocking new skills along the way. But then also out in the world, you're going to find various trainers who have their own abilities, and they will teach these to you after you complete certain tasks for them. So after you do a couple of quests or build up their reputation or something like that. In terms of the game's overall combat, they refer to it, I mentioned it a moment ago, but they're calling this combined arms. It consists of some combination of melee, ranged abilities, and vehicles. Each of these elements players can utilize at various times.
Like, I like the concept and idea of taking Planetside and making it in the Dune universe, because I think it would probably translate well and be really fun. I just don't see where the survival aspect goes into it. Like, the whole managing your thirst, your heat and stuff is like cool, but yeah, I'm wary.
Combat, they can specialize in them. You can specialize in being a melee character with melee focused abilities, ranged, scout, etc. There's going to be a lot of kind of specialization within the different roles that you can fulfill. And the game's world, combat plays a big role in it. You know, you start off with little, you go out, you adventure, take on some PvE threats. Eventually you'll find yourself in PvP scenarios. The world is going to be divided into multiple separate sections, which can be boiled down to safe areas and hostile regions. And in those hostile areas, you'll of course find highly valuable resources and loot, but at the same time, it's going to be full-on, all-out PvP, and they've even mentioned that friendly fire exists in the game, so you best be careful where you're pointing that gun. Another big part of the Dune game is going to be the environment, but then also the large creatures within them.
I wonder how much that's going to flop, because you're forced with thousands of players with forced PvP, forced friendly fire. That is a huge no-no for so many people that I know. Especially things that they hated in other games.
And I'm explicitly talking about sandworms here, because besides other players and factions of enemy NPCs, sandworms exist as this omnipresent threat while playing the game. They are drawn by player activity and especially alerted during combat. They have actually referred to this, their implementation of sandworms, as a tension mechanic that forces players to think about their actions for fear of drawing the worm's attention, because there are two things to keep in mind. Number one, you can't kill sandworms. No matter what you do, no matter what weapons you have, they ain't dying. The only thing that you can really do is try to avoid them. So they're going to be smaller sandworms, which will be drawn to and chase down individual players or small groups of players, but then also the giant ring-mouth sandworms that show up at large events like faction battles and wars that take place over spice, which is the game's highly coveted resource used for a lot of the various progression and crafting systems. These ones are said to be so large that they will be in fact swallowing entire buildings. I'm curious how that's going to be implemented in the game, but it sounds like a cool premise. And then you can
also sounds like griefing potential. No. It sounds cool and all, but Yeah, the entire survival base building aspect of it, I'm like, I'm not sold on it. Can you move your butt, Midnight?
Also use distracting techniques, like you can call in thumpers, which will direct a sandworm, either drawing it away from somewhere you want to be, or maybe you place a thumper down by other players where you want the sandworm to go and mess up their day. There's going to be a kind of a lot of play here with the environment and calling the sandworms to and away from you. You can also use vehicles to avoid or escape the sandworms, like ornithopters have you flying in the air. That's obviously a great way to avoid them. Or if you have a sand bike, you can use that to run away when you know that a sandworm is incoming. And then the sands themselves are going to be changing the environment and the play space. So apparently there's going to be specific areas of the game subject to the shifting sands feature, where once a week, acting like a weekly reset, these sandstorms will roll in, completely changing the environment and the landscape in these regions. They can wipe out player outposts, cover up and reveal brand new points of interest, highly valuable resource locations, various spots for loot, all sorts of potential here. This is actually a really interesting sounding system, and I like that they have this thematic way to provide these dynamic areas where every week new points of interest will show up, old ones will go away, player constructed buildings within these areas will...
That sounds like... Ah, God, what's the name of it? There's another one. Thank you, Kat. I appreciate you. Oh, there's another one that's just like that, but I forgot the name of it. Midnight is such a menace right now. And I even played it for a tiny bit. I'm just trying to see if I can see it on my Last Oasis. So that sounds pretty much like Last Oasis's system that constantly changes, and you have a timer where you get wiped out and you lose all resources and you gotta move on. So it sounds like a similar system to that.
Potentially get swallowed up. Although do keep in mind there is safety regions of the world. So there are safe areas where you can build a base, but then you can essentially build a base out in the wild to more easily ferry your goods or whatever, or provide shelter while you're out exploring. But you have to realize that those will not be permanent structures, because the incoming shifting sands and even the sandworms could at some point get rid of them. Speaking of base building, there will of course be base building in this game. In fact, the developer said that they took the systems used in their other survival game, Conan Exiles, and have that as the base foundation for the crafting and building, but they have further improved and added upon it. So that it's going to be a template style of building, but they have further improved and added.
It definitely does look like it's Conan inspired, including the way like things are looking, like the structures and...
So it's going to be a template style of building. You're not placing down like individual tiles, but rather taking these templates and putting down a floor chunk, a wall chunk, roofs, stairs, all of the usual fare. You can then also construct various forms of refining stations, crafting stations, and production facilities. There's going to have co-op building in the game, and this will be facilitated through these holograms that let your allies see and contribute to a construction. So for example, if you place down a workbench, that might require some combination of stone and metal. You and other players can then fill
the shot was from Conan with the trebuchets. Yeah, I was just saying it looks like... I was looking at it because comparing it to the Dune one, to this one, the building that they keep showing, that this is the only thing that we have. And I'm wondering, because they mentioned they're showing the siege and everything, or he's showing the siege, I'm thinking that perhaps we're gonna also have base sieging as well, because they did mention we have special thumpers and other stuff.
production facilities. There's going to have co-op building in the game, and this will be facilitated through these holograms that let your allies see and contribute to a construction. So for example, if you place down a workbench, that might require some combination of stone and metal. You and other players can then fill those requirements once they're full. The bench is complete and constructed. You can also, as you're building a base, you can create blueprints, which you can then either gift to your friends or even sell to other players on the game's in-game exchange, basically like an auction house. And as I mentioned, there will be different
Okay.
types of base building. You will have these permanent base structures that you can build in safe locations, but there will also be more on-the-go structures that you build while out exploring the dunes of Arrakis. They've even mentioned how you can have base defense, like by generating a personal shield just for your base to help protect it from sandstorms and enemy players as well. The game's going to feature plenty of co-op as well. You can group up and explore with others. They have an in-game ping system to let you point stuff out. I really like that this has been more widely implemented in games without having to use VoIP, being able to communicate with people in your party without having to chat, without having to type it out. It's just a really nice feature. I'm glad they're including it. And they also really try to emphasize the fact that while playing as a group, you can fill different roles. And this is going to apply in a variety of contexts. So this applies in like the exploration and combat context, where depending on the abilities that you're using, you can be more offensive, more defensive, and more support. But this also applies more widely to how you play the game, with you able to fill different roles that are...
It gives me Star Wars MMO vibes a tiny bit. with that, I don't know why. The visual follows the movie. Yeah, like I can tell, though it is definitely lacking texture. Like in my opinion, it's a bit too clean compared to at least the first part of the movie. I haven't seen the second one. What's the game called? It's the DUNE MMO. Also, hi Killer, welcome in. No, I haven't seen Terminator ones.
Beyond combat or beyond just gathering resources and doing the general survival loop, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. They also say they have a journey system and a system of contracts, which basically...
A Terminator survival? That sounds interesting as well. Contracts.
Just sound like variations of questing, of different tasks that you can complete for
sounds like guild quests
resources,
for reputation and stuff.
Gain. And they have mentioned that they are going to make sure to try to fulfill various types of content.
They did have contracts. Well, in Conan, they have the battle pass where you can do stuff. Their battle pass system is actually interesting. It's kind of like pay once, have forever type thing, if I remember right. But it was kind of interesting to see the battle pass in a survival not up in your face like that.
Content for both small groups, individual players, and then large-scale guild-focused activities and content. Politics are going to play a big role as well, as the game's overarching goal. The big thing that's focused here is this ongoing war between two factions, and at some point in progression, you as a player will pick which side, which faction you want to fight for, and then you're going to partake in missions for that faction, working your way up the ranks with the opportunity to take a position of power for the most dedicated players. That sounds like a high warlord grind or something like that. You're just going to be grinding up the ranks for reputation, and there are going to be some top spots, although they have not yet clarified from what I've saw what that unlocks access to, other than maybe a title. Maybe there's more, but we just don't know. I just don't know as of yet. And then also they spent part of this presentation just talking a bit about the game's visuals. I gotta say, looks a lot better than what we saw in the early days. It definitely seems like through development they have progressed quite a bit on the visual front. They spoke a bit about some of the technical advantages that Unreal Engine 5 gives them to try to make the game look really good. A lot of the same stuff that you hear pretty much from any developer using Unreal Engine 5, but they just recapped by saying, hey, Lumen is here to create natural looking lighting. This looks especially great indoors and even in player crafted buildings. And then of course Nanite, which breaks down high quality assets into lower poly versions based on player distance, rather than all the extra work that developers used to have to do to create these level of detail models, making different versions of all the game's assets depending on how far.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it definitely looks interesting. It looks very ambitious, but I also feel like they're biting more than they can chew. Have forever when the servers are wonky, you can't use anything when offline. I meant like you can finish it and complete it. You know how a lot of battle passes require you to play within the time limit? People are saying that one you don't have a time limit to finish it once you purchase it. I don't know because I haven't looked into it personally, so I can't really comment on it. But I heard that people like their battle pass more compared to other battle passes in games. Another survival to add to my list. Dude, this year is crazy for survivals.
Away the player was models, making different versions of all the game's assets depending on how far away the player was to them. So great features, great tech in UE5. Let's devs make games that look good. From what we're seeing in this most recent showcase, yeah, I think Dune Awakening looks pretty darn good. Now, towards the end of the event, they also released a new gameplay trailer, which had quite a few clips showcasing some of these in-game features and content. So we saw the intro, the basic survival start where players begin with nothing and then go out scavenging for resources. We saw one of those small sandworms emerging from the dunes and then chasing the player. We got some great examples of crafting with a player building a suit of armor, placing down pieces of a base, and even constructing crafting stations. There were a few shots of some ground and air vehicles on display. We saw traversal systems with players climbing the side of the mountain, which looked cool. There were some high-tech gadgets on display. We saw air combat with an ornithopter. We saw a little bit of magic use, such as these players levitating, combined with a few quick combat clips. There was also a moment in the trailer where one large, what looked to be like a guild base being constructed, and then finally players scouting out one of these in-progress large-scale combined arms battles taking place. You see like little players running around with their guns. You see ground and air vehicles all combined with explosions and shooting and tracer rounds and abilities. I mean, if done right and if it runs well and if it plays well, that's a really cool, the idea of getting like a battlefield or a planet side inside of a survival sandbox MMO sounds great if they can actually deliver on the tech, on having gameplay that feels good.
Yeah, I
making
agree.
Sure it doesn't run like total garbage. If they can do that, that sounds really good. Most notably from the trailer, it did feature what looked to be a close representation of the Dune film's main actor, but not close enough for them to have to pay any of the likeness rights. It's just like, got like the curly hair and like this same general face shape. I just thought it was kind of funny. Now, following this, we also saw an interview released with PC Gamer where Dune Awakening's creative director discussed how they're pulling a lot of inspiration from old school MMORPGs. He said that Star Wars Galaxies was a huge inspiration.
You know when I said earlier that it looks like Star Wars? Bruh.
For us. That is the style of MMO we really like, the old sandboxy MMOs. Then World of Warcraft came out and everyone copied that for a few years. Yeah, just a few years, or still do. But a lot of us are old school MMO players. Funcom's been around for a while, even made one of the originals with Anarchy Online. After that, he went on to talk about the fact that a lot of the old school MMO design then kind of splintered off into other genres in the post-WoW era. And this is he's on point here. He said the crafting part of MMOs became survival games with smaller private servers. MOBAs were like the MMO PvP mini games back in the day. The survival elements are a different kind of funnel into the game.
That's kind of true.
I think about it, but I don't think they're miles apart. We like that concept that this is where survival games are.
Like, I can see where he's coming off with that. Like, definitely feels inspired.
They are the sandbox break-off of MMOs, and we can bring that back. And yeah, I mean, in my opinion, he is spot on here with this idea that what was once a part of a larger combination of features that we saw included in many of the in the early MMORPGs. A lot of that got spun off into different genres over the years, because after the success of WoW, it seems pretty much every subsequent MMO, with but a few exceptions, has kind of followed along that theme park formula that Blizzard helped bring into the mainstream and popularize. And then instead of getting...
It's very true to a degree that a lot of them change direction in what an MMO is like. But also because of WoW, a lot of people refuse to kind of give a chance to different types of MMOs. And they get very nitpicky about how much content the game has. Like, people don't consider it an MMO if you don't have raiding endgame available from the get-go, with preferably several raids.
Other new kinds of MMOs over these years, we've just seen parts of that genre get spun off and turn into more focused games. So yeah, MOBAs kind of took the place of MMO PvP and just removed that long character progression time investment of having to level up a character and then gear it up and then do the PvP. They said, hey, let's just do the PvP, make it round-based, you get gear, you level up, but all within like a 30 to 60 minute time frame of an individual game. And then yeah, survival games Games kind of took that sandbox element of some of those early MMOs and then consolidated it and shrunk it down into an experience on a smaller and more refined scale. And so instead of getting a lot of actual large scale survival sandbox MMOs, we get smaller survival games and theme park MMOs. And that
The immense spacing guild Highliner transports are a constant reminder of off-world scrutiny. Without consuming spice from Arrakis, guild navigators cannot foresee safe paths.
That's how it is. And they've said here that with Dune Awakening, they're hoping to bring a lot of that old school MMO into the now established version of the survival genre. And they hope to do this with a larger scale and a diverse.
And you have temperature changing within day and night.
Way to play the game, and that's where some of the more MMO elements are going to come into play. Beyond just the large number of players on a server, this is where that old school MMO inspiration is going to come into play with Dune Awakening, because they discussed in detail during that showcase how players can fill various roles in terms of how they play. Of course, combat will be a focus. You can focus on going out and questing and doing PvE and grinding and collecting resources and all that stuff, or you can focus on the PvP, because a big part of the end game is going to be that big conflict with other players fighting over those valuable resources in that combined arms battlefield style gameplay. Those are going to play a big role in the game. It's even a focus of the end game. But in addition to that, or in exclusion of doing those things, you could choose to be a master crafter. You can specialize in making certain types of armor or weapons or tools and then sell the things you make on the game's exchange. You can also focus on being an architect, constructing these cool looking buildings of all sorts of different varieties and styles and selling those blueprints to other players. So instead of spending the several hours or days of making this really cool looking structure, they can just buy the blueprints, place the blueprints down, and then fill them up with the resources.
That sounds really cool. That actually sounds really cool, just like having people actually be architects for designs, because there are a lot of people that make really wicked, super cool bases and stuff. And being able to replicate that design without them having to put in the effort to build it for you again, that would be amazing.
But you can spend your playtime being the architect who builds those buildings and sells those blueprints. You could also focus on something like being a scout. They're going to have this system where you go out and explore the environment, and you can actually map out the world, placing the key location indicators for valuable resources and points of interest, and then you can craft maps that you sell to other players. I did not realize that this was a thing. I wonder if this is going to largely pertain to those areas where the shifting sands come in weekly and change the landscape. Maybe it's the case. It seems like it might be the case that those areas will not be mapped out in-game by default for the players, but you will have players who go out and adventure every week and map them out and craft these maps that you can then buy from them. That sounds pretty cool. And then
it sounds cool, but it also sounds like it's going to attract a lot of bots.
I would be hesitant to neglect mentioning one final thing that I thought was really cool that he mentioned towards the end of the video, where he said that if the game director were here, he would be saying, if the game feels really good to play moment to moment, the way you move in the world, the way you shoot in the world, driving, if those things feel great, and then you have this amazing universe around it, it's gonna be fine. And I will say absolutely for sure. We don't know if they're gonna deliver, but I think it's so important that they are at least acknowledging and considering this, because those things, if done well, can absolutely make for a good base game. And then all of these supporting systems and features, if your world is interesting to explore and navigate, if you've got satisfying progression systems and engaging content that can keep people coming back, those things combined with the great feeling gameplay, the great movement, the great moment to moment, the great action, the great traversal, those things all coming together can then turn a good game into a great game. We don't know how Dune Awakening is going to turn out. If they nail the moment to moment, the action, the gameplay, the feel, the traversal, the immersive world, we don't know how it's going to go, but I am so happy to hear that they are at least acknowledging that those things are important, because yes, that is the key baseline to making a good game. And then if the rest comes into play, maybe you end up with a great game. So when are we going to get to play Dune Awakening? Well, as I mentioned, it is slated for release this year. They have said that closed beta tests have been running for several months now and that they are going well, according to the developer. Their plan is to slowly but surely invite more players over time, and they will be working with the community and taking feedback to help improve the game, yada yada, all the stuff you hear from any game that's in beta testing. If you
As a side note, did I mention how much I freaking hate closed betas and early access to stuff? And it's like you have an MMO and you're gonna have so many guides and so many here's how the optimal thing is, here's where the best spot to build your base is, here's where you go and do this, and here's how you do that. And it's just like that alone just sours the experience for me already. Like having to channel, like just tune down any leaks and any like it's not even leaks, any footage from it. It's like ugh. And then dealing with the backseaters on top. And at the same time feeling like I've been scammed because yeah, all the resources that I want are already farmed and camped because people already know that. So yeah, to me it's you can't have a game without beta tests. You can limit how much you give people access to your tests.
If you are interested, there is registration available over on the official website. It is still open, and they did mention that we should expect to start seeing a lot more about the game as we progress throughout the year. They also mentioned that this event here, which was called Dune Awakening Direct, this was episode 1. There will be plenty more of these in the future as well, so I'll keep an eye out, and I will keep you guys up to date with any major and interesting new information that comes from them. I gotta say, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I do like what we've seen of the game thus far, and I'm hoping it turns out well. Also hope that we see some sort of large-scale open testing prior to the game's release so we can get our hands on it and see if it plays well, if it runs well, and if all of these systems and features
I hope we don't.
they've talked about end up resulting in an engaging gameplay loop. They certainly have some big shoes to fill following on the back of Pal World and Shrouded and Sun.
Like, I personally hope that we don't get that because like, dude, the best part of an MMO, the best part of a survival is just getting your hands on it and playing it for the first time. And I can tell you the experience from New World and how it was. The experience from New World was basically, oh, hey, well, I can't wait to be max level. Oh, I have to like chop like another 10,000 trees. I gotta like speed run through that. I gotta go really fast through here because you did it in the beta already. And it just you don't have the same amount. Like you have the noobs who are getting ganked by you. You have like the people that know where to find the resources. You have the people that know which territory to claim first, and it just kind of like takes a lot away, in my opinion, from both an MMO and a survival. So yeah, that part I'm not looking forward to it. But other than that, the MMO itself looks very ambitious. I don't know whether it's gonna succeed or not because there's very little info. They want to do a ton, and right now it looks like a jungle of mess where you're not really gonna get a survival. It's more a survival in the sense that before you get all your gear, you're gonna struggle a bit to, you have to deal with the environment. Probably. But base building, I don't know. Hopefully there is a huge world where you have buildings, though I don't really see how you can potentially have that without instances. At least for the safe areas, and for the other ones you probably need a clan to build something to limit the amount of people that can do stuff. I don't know. Because otherwise it's gonna freaking lag. If thousands of people have crafting stuff, all of them all always going off, it's like, Call me a negative person, I guess, but I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical they can pull such a thing off, so I can't be hyped for it. But I will try it out. Like, I will try it out. I like survivals, and I liked Planetside, and I liked Star Wars, and I liked a lot of the things it took inspiration from, including Conan. Like, I liked a lot of that. But I don't know if I will like this.